Thanks so much for coming on the show today. We're just sifting through the game from last night. Another defeat for the Maple Leafs here against the Florida Panthers. What's your read on the Panthers? What makes that team so difficult to play against?
Well, I think they're gritty, number one. I think they dig in pretty hard, play physical, but, I mean, they have some good complementary players that stay on top of you. They got good team speed. You know, a lot of the Finns they have on that team are extraordinary. But I think their work ethic, I think Paul Maurice really has them playing a game since the time he lit them up, I think, on the bench in Toronto there last year. They've really changed and really dug in. And you know, maybe that was a couple years ago. I can't remember. But I really think that they epitomize, Paul and his ways and the way that he's been a great coach for many years.
Yeah, what about Bobrovsky himself in particular? I mean, I really think he was the difference maker in a series they played a couple of years ago. When he's on his game, what makes him so great?
Well, I mean, people see his reaction. He's, the save he made last year in the finals, diving over and just anticipating, turning backwards, I think shows the athleticism. But the way he reads plays, he makes things look easy. The puck sticks to him, and that today's goalie, I mean, you got to be able to hold on to pucks. You look at teams, goals against, what's the difference between, a team that's only given up 200 goals versus one that's given up 245, and probably the goaltending and how the puck sticks to them. So we know that 85% of the goals are scored right at net front, and as it should be when you arrive hard. So you got to hold hard, and I think he holds hard, and not a lot of dirt happens around this crease.
Well, that's exactly it. And again, we're trying to break down this game last night where the Panthers outshoot the Maple Leafs 36-18. You're a former netminder, or U.S. Hockey Hall of Famer. I mean, you've done your thing in the league for a variety of years. What pissed you off when you were in the crease? Like, I thought that the night was just way too easy for Sergei Bobrovsky. How do you combat a really strong elite netminder?
Well, every coach will tell you pucks to the net. And I think, making him work, we just talked about that he holds on to pucks well and things like that, but you really have to not turn down any shots. I know, back in the day, you can say that Hasek got into everybody's head, right? Because they didn't want to shoot the puck. But I think you have to pull the trigger, especially seeing a lot of the wide angle goals that go in. It's just, you got to hit the net. And I believe that hit and arrival is probably the hardest to defend. Keeping it in his feet has been an adage that has been an age-old adage, keep it in the goalie's feet. But for him, you got to really make him work. And I believe that he's at his best, when he does see a lot of rubber and he can actually steal games. One of the few netminders that you go in thinking that, you got a chance every time he's in there. But he does have a tendency to give up some goals from wide angles, deep angles. And I think you have to keep throwing the puck at the net, not turn down any plays. The one more look for a pretty play is a killer. And with skill on Toronto, that's what happens a lot. They turn down a shot and, they're going the other way.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Toronto, they've got two pretty solid netminders, Americans this year, and Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz. How would you deploy those two goalies if you were the head of the Maple Leafs?
Well, it's a really good question. As everybody's heading into the playoffs, obviously we're talking Bobrovsky. It's an easy way to handle that situation. But I think when you're looking at a tandem, I think it's not as easy as you can just talk about it and say, I think we should do this. What I see in the way is that Anthony Stolarz is a great, probably one that has been the premier second goalie. I wouldn't call him a backup. He's been the premier second goalie in the NHL for a long time. And there's nobody that can come off the bench like him, handle pucks, get into the game quick. He's a great puck handler and really give you a shot in the arm. Is he the guy you should start? I would say, if you're asking me, no. I would say he's the guy that is always ready. He's a consummate pro. Let's keep him on the bench, and if we need to go to him, that's what we do. And I think with Joseph and the emergence of his game, I know he's been nicked up. I'm not sure what he's battling, but Joe's got a really strong head, and he battles hard from the get-go. And you got to hope that a guy gets hot. And really, it's about the hot goalie and really a determined start. I mean, if you get off to a really good start and you're determined in there, you want to keep that rolling. It's not, looking at the process down the road and the result. It's staying there from the beginning, staying in the moment, and trying to keep that moment as long as you can.
Because maybe it's the market, Beezer, but I think a lot of the conversation right now is who starts game one. For me, a bigger focus is who finishes the series, right? I think we're in an environment, in an era where you're going to need both goaltenders. And I think you make a good point. I think obviously there's a higher ceiling with a guy like Joseph Woll, who's 26, who could be primed for just a career breakout in the postseason. How many guys around this age have we seen get to the playoffs? They find their light and they just go with it. Because I thought last year, before he got hurt, didn't play in Game 7, Woll was starting to emerge as like an elite type level netminder, and obviously shut down due to the injury in Game 7. But I think he has the higher potential, and I think you would agree with that.
Yeah, I think, both. I mean, I don't want to talk against anybody, but I really believe that, they got good goaltending. Bottom line, it's the doubt that you can't allow to creep in, right? I mean, you got good goaltending. They're going to give you a shot. I believe that Joel will probably be the starter for game one. And, based on health conditions, they've both been battling stuff. So I think you're going to go with a healthy goalie as the starter, whoever that may be at the time. But also you got to look at how the last 5 games go this season, because you want to carry your last 5 into the playoffs, and they're very important. And I know that teams like to rest guys at this point. I'm not a believer in that. Every time you rest a guy, you come out and you're in a funk. And can't let this vacation start early, right? You got to keep it tight. You got to keep rolling, and you really have to have a tournament mentality, not a playoff mentality, because you got to have a single elimination mentality. Like, if we lose today, it could be over. And I think that you got to fight for your space hard that way. And I think, Joe has given them enough to earn that space. I think, they're strong in that position. It's a matter of, again, having a tournament mentality, I believe.
Just while we have you here, John, I'm just curious to your take on how you have seen goaltending evolve over the years and decades, and also how you feel about putting yourself in this era of goaltending.
Well, to answer the question first, I would never be put into this era of goaltending because I'm 5'9". So the small goalie they're gone. But, to really give a shout out to the goaltenders today, they're great athletes. I'm not in favor of all the ways they play and the reverse VH and I've seen goalies kick pucks into their own net just by going back to the post. I don't believe the hands are as good as they used to be, but that doesn't matter. What matters is look at how they play. Look at the save percentage. Look at the efficiency. And I've got a lot of affinity and like for the goaltending today. I just wish more style would be there, right? Like I would, a lot of them are playing the same way. I think over the history of goaltending, you've loved styles, right? And what, the epitome of that is the mask, right? But the personification of guys like Cujo and Hasek and Waugh and Brodeur and all of the greats, and you take it, like, they all had style. They all played a different way. You had to, nobody could really dump the puck in on Marty because he would play it so efficiently, so you had to dump it in on his backhand, and things, became strategy. I think all the strategies are somewhat the same, Power plays are becoming the same. So when you start looking at the goaltending position, a guy who reads plays well, like Connor Hellebuck, and has the size, is going to be a top goalie in the league for a long time.
So much swagger in that era. You're so right. Eddie Belfour is another name that comes to mind in
Yeah.
this market too. But I wanted to ask you about Matthew Knies enjoying a breakout season. Of course, over in the States, you guys are rather familiar with Knies. And I just think it's amazing because he plays like a seasoned pro that has been in the league for 10 years, but it's only been a couple years and really enjoying a nice offensive breakout this season. And I think you look at the Maple Leafs in the postseason, Matthew Knies clearly going to have to be a big piece if they go on a deep run here.
Yeah, I mean, Maddie's really emerging as a top power forward. There's very few like him that can play at top speed, arrive at the front of the net. I think he surprised everybody with his fight. And, I see a different type of player than what emerged coming out of, Sioux City in the USHL. And then, with us, we're in our COVID times, we had to use him at the Olympics, World Junior. But I remember Jeff Lashley when he was at a World Junior camp that we had. He's like, "Who is this Knies kid? And if he's not on your team, I'll eat my shorts," kind of thing like that. And I was like, "Boy, I better watch Knies a little bit closer." But Matty has become a different player, through Minnesota. Now as a pro, I think he's used very well. Chief is really doing a nice job with him. But playing with top guys, right? You got to have the ability to play with top guys. He's earned the right to be there. They like for him to go to the front of the net. And when guys are really those trackers and those drivers, they get rewarded. And we saw it back in the day with Bertuzzi and the hard guys that drive hard in the net. They get rewarded. And like I think of Jamie Benn and some of his top years, he's a driver in that same. I mean, that's a pretty good group of people to be put in, that he's a Bertuzzi type of Benn player. So, I mean, his years, and I know that they got to figure out how to pay him, but I mean, he's going to be a horse. But I see a different player. I see a different Matthew Knies. I see him as true power now.
I'm just curious what your take on Dustin Wolf is. There's a guy that's having a lot of success that certainly isn't 6'7".
No, but he plays like he's 6'7", and I think that the success he's had, with their minor league affiliate, every year winning and being at the top of the league. I mean, acceptance in that position is a big piece. I feel like whether he's borderline 6 feet to 6'1". But you're accepted as a top player, and then you're going to be given the opportunity to perform. And obviously, I think he's had a great year. He's without the play of like Lane Hudson and some of the other rookies, he's probably rookie of the year. And so that says a lot. You're in with a great group of players. These are all generational players. Celebrini, Hudson, Wolf, they're going to be around for 10 years. So good for him. I'm happy for an undersized goalie, but I think, the tough times come. I mean, they play a really good game. I really love watching Calgary play. They play fast. They play hard. They got a real shot. They need a little help, but I think they'd be a tough team to play because of his goaltending, and I think he's won the job. So, and I've known Dustin for a while, and the way that he preps for games is, something that I took pride in doing myself. So I kind of relate to that.
You played with Chief in Philadelphia, right?
I did, and on the island.
What was that? What was that experience to have him as a teammate first and foremost?
He's the best. He's the best teammate you could ever have. He's just a genuine guy. He is who he is. I mean, people want genuine today. I think, I don't know him as much as a coach, and I'm really happy for him to get these opportunities. He's earned them. Obviously, what he did with St. Louis, but I think authenticity and being genuine. As a coach today, that's number one thing. Players know the deal. They know insecurities, but Chief's the real deal because he's just himself. And, I think we all love him for that. Anybody who's played with him know how much sacrifice he gave as a player. It was a different time, but I also think that, I remember him saying once, I'll fight anybody, but I'm going to take a 2-minute instigator to go with it. So, it's just that kind of mentality. Like he knows what he needs to do in order for a result to happen. And I'm thrilled for him, actually.
The most exciting time of year, John. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a lot of fun, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks, man.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.